What about that, by the way? We know you, and we think in the terms of early '60s, a strong influence here has been.
That was the thing, like
early '60s drifters, New York,
right?
Spanish Harlem.
I always kind of, I never really went in for the fad thing. If it was 1 week wearing a motorcycle jacket and playing, EAB, and then the week after that, you wore a Mohican, and if that didn't work, then, you did something else, and there were these fads that kind of came in and out. And we always kind of just stuck with what we thought was really real. And I've always thought that there are two kinds of records, good records and bad records. And like you can listen to Billie Holiday back in 1942, you can listen to Billie Holiday in 1999. You can listen to Elvis records the same. You can listen to the Drifters records. Those are classic records, and they will always be classic records. So I've always aspired to putting out records, sort of trying to, get close to my heroes, which were those people, the Drifters, Benny King.
Yeah.
Which I got a chance to work with Doc Pomus, actually, and
Jack Nitschke.
Everything I ever wrote with him, it would naturally just come out like Benny King and the Drifters. So that ended up to be kind of like my shtick, Now,
but
I'm
update
kind of trying to, update it. Yeah, it's not like, you're not going to say, oh, it sounds like an oldie, because like you're trying to do a contemporary record to just, take a
You got the emotion of the Drifters and those people.
Yeah, that's because when I grew up, those were the records that really meant something to you. It's like you broke up with your girl. There goes my baby. That was a reality for me.
You're from New York.
Yeah.
You've been living in New Orleans for the past 10, 12 years. We have a couple standard questions I'll give to you two guys. One is, what's the first record you ever bought?
First record I ever bought was You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog by Elvis Presley.
And what's the first show you ever saw? Rock show?
That I can remember?
Yeah.
Was Elvis Presley on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. That I can remember. It might have been the Dick Clark Show before that, but no, I think it was Elvis Presley.
What about attending it? What about going to a show?
Oh, going
Did
to
you go
a
to the
show?
Brooklyn Fox or
the Brooklyn Fox shows. I can remember going to those.
Who'd you see?
Jesus, there was a show. It had Benny King. It had the Ronettes.
Ooh.
It had Jackie Wilson. It had who else? And then it had this band that was just kind of like the backup band, and they did kind of instrumentals and stuff. But everybody did like either a medley of their 3 hits. They'd kind of dip in and out of them. Back then, it was more like a review.
A review that ran like 6 times a day.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It wasn't like today. You go out when I go out on the road or something. I'm doing like an hour and a half, 2 hours on stage. Back then, they would just do
10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Yeah, something like that. Which go ahead, tell them what was your first single. Because I got to tell you something great after that.
I don't think anybody cares about. I'd rather hear Willie.
Well, the reason I want to ask you, because the more embarrassing, the better. Maybe it was James Darren. Maybe you bought Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Bikini. That's what I like to hear.
Actually, my father really encouraged me, and I had a little 45 record player that he started me listening to Hopalong Cassidy, and then one day he brought some rock and roll records.
He brought you rock and roll records?
He brought them home. He says, I went to the store and I asked a teenager, and they said, he brought them home, and
you remember one?
I remember the Everly Brothers, Wake Up Little Susie, but the first record I personally went out and bought was Dion and the Belmonts, I Wonder Why.
Cool.
And the first show I ever saw was the Rolling Stones in San Bernardino, the first LA appearance.
It's a swing auditorium.
Yeah, and the place was hardly full, maybe a few hundred people in there.
Is that right? That was Paul's big epiphany, too, was seeing the Stones back in '65.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, something you said, you mentioned a guy. I want to use this for an insert into a previous show right now. We had this guy, Buddy Bailey, with the Clovers, lead singer, on a while ago. And he was a very nice, polite show. Then the lights went out. We had to sit around for a while. Then he starts really coming out with the great stuff because we're off the air. So when I think it was you, they said, well, you worked in the early 50s. I mean, you saw Jackie Wilson, didn't you? And he said, yeah. He said, man, he really worked. I mean, wasn't he great? I mean, tell me about it. He really moved, didn't he? Really moved a lot, didn't he? And he says, if you were taking what he was taking, You couldn't help but move.
Right, yeah.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
You couldn't do nothing but move.